أهلا بحضراتكم على بودكاست فكرة في كلمة. النهارده الحقيقة إحنا بنكمل حديثنا مع دكتور أنتوني قلادة عن القلق، ولكن النهارده هنتكلم على أسباب القلق، والحقيقة مش أسباب اللي أنت عارفها العادية، يعني واحد مضغوط في العمل فده سبب له قلق، واحد عنده امتحان فسبب له قلق، واحد عنده مشاكل في علاقاته العاطفية سبب له قلق مزمن. أنا هنتكلم على الأسباب اللي حضرتك ما تعرفهاش بتسبب في النهاية إن يكون عند حضرتك قلق أو اضطراب القلق المزمن أو anxiety. Dr. Anthony Kalada, thank you so much for joining us again today.
My pleasure, Mark. Thank you for having me.
So, today we are going to continue our discussion in the second episode about anxiety.
Mhm.
And I know that you have some news for us about the hidden reasons that we might do every day and we don't know about it and cause an anxiety in our life.
That's right. So much of anxiety is not in our control, but there's also a lot that can be in our control. And that's probably where one needs to focus to try to get the anxiety resolved or at least minimize it or make it as small as possible.
So, what do you think is happening in our daily life that may be built in our habit or built in our daily routine that might build up with time and cause an anxiety?
Well, I think there's a few factors. We can get very busy with things. And so sometimes when we're too busy, that may be causing anxiety. We're not able to take a break or just relax. Or maybe a lot of times we're focusing on other people when we have to focus on ourselves to work on what we're going through, what we need help with.
Being a dad or being a friend or being even a son, taking care of his parents is a lot of work. So, do you think this is something that might cause an anxiety?
Well, I think in some aspects that can be a healthy anxiety. We call that actually anticipatory anxiety, where there's something that could be happening in the future that could happen. That anxiety or that stress helps one to prepare for it. For example, if a student has anxiety about an exam coming up, maybe that'll motivate them to study or to prepare for the exam. Or maybe if a mom has anxiety that their kid is not going to have enough food to eat, that motivates them to prepare food for their child to eat. So sometimes those worries that we have can be motivating and helpful for us to get things done.
Talking about food, you mentioned the example of the mom making food for the kids. I will ask you, do you think any of the food we eat every day might be hidden in the or one of the hidden reason for an
Yeah, and if you recall, I talked about it a little bit on our first episode, but there is this association with the food we eat and the gut, the bacteria in our stomach and intestines, and somehow there's a correlation to where the types of food that we eat, the more junk food, the more processed foods, a lot of sugars, can actually lead to more psychological problems in our lives, like anxiety being one of them.
interesting? So sugar, junk food, anything else?
There's a lot, and it might be specific on certain people because it has to do, at least the leading theory is it has to do with the biochemical pathways that occur from when the bacteria digest the food and it signaling throughout our bodies and our brains. So caffeine, tea, sodas, energy drinks. Sometimes I see people who are on a lot of these and they come because they're anxious and they need to cut back on this stuff or maybe eliminate it altogether to help their anxiety or help with their mental health.
Can we have an easy prescription, Dr. Kalada, about, let's say, what's the maximum you recommend from sugar, caffeine, or per day and junk food per week, maybe? Or I know you said it's better to eliminate it altogether, right? But if we cannot,
I wish it was a one size fits all where everyone could have the same thing or be very clear. Some people may be more prone to it than others. For example, if someone's family and their genetics, they're more likely to get anxiety, then maybe they have to eliminate altogether. But if someone doesn't have that predisposition to get anxiety, maybe, for example, caffeine, they could have 300 milligrams in a day. Or maybe if you minimize the amount of food, like junk food, and you can identify if you get anxious shortly after having it, maybe that's a sign. But Again, it's not like a one size fits all. So it's kind of important for someone to be aware of what they're eating and drinking and how that is affecting them mentally, even physically too.
So, do you think, Dr. Kalada, that anyone feeling anxious, we talked about in our last episode how to know that you're anxious, right? Maybe they can try if they are overweight or they're obese, maybe they can try to lose some weight and maybe play some sports. This is something you recommend?
That'd be very important because also how our physical health is can affect our mental health. So maybe someone is anxious because they're overweight, or maybe someone's anxious because they're not physically active. But when they become healthier and when they become more physically active, maybe they won't be as anxious anymore. They won't be as depressed. So there's a big correlation between the two.
We talked about reasons, or I'm sorry, we talked about the signs of know that I'm anxious or I have an anxiety, and you guys gonna find the link in the description. But just as a reminder, especially not as a reminder, just when we were discussing the episode, you mentioned something about the sleep that you can identify if you have anxiety or not through your sleeping pattern, which is actually, when I read about it, it was very easy for me to identify. Can you please give us more details about the sleep and how it can be a thermometer, if you may say, for anxiety?
Sure. If I see someone who I think is suffering from anxiety, and then I can ask a few questions about their sleep habits, because typically, if these sleep habits are affected, that could be a sign of anxiety. For example, if someone has a hard time falling asleep, a lot of times they could be thinking about something or they have racing thoughts that makes them difficult for them to fall asleep right away. So that could be a sign of anxiety. Or sometimes people can wake up during the night or wake up multiple times during the night, and that's because there's something on their mind or they have racing thoughts or worries. So usually if they have a hard time falling asleep or they wake up during the night, usually not all the time, but often that is a sign of anxiety.
Thank you so much, Dr. Krada, for that. I really appreciate it. We also talked about the habits. And when I was introducing the episode, I said the hidden habits that we can be doing every day and they can go an anxiety, can cause an anxiety for us. We talked about food, we talked about caffeine and all those habits, and even eating junk food, which in our lifestyle we're doing this daily. But I want to talk with you also about the other habits that can maybe hidden or high hidden cause for an anxiety.
Sure. I think a lot of one that I often see people saying that they have to avoid because they think it causes them more stress or anxiety is the media. What they see on the news, especially if it's something that's out of their control, maybe it's wars or killings or there's someone in charge that they don't agree with. For a lot of people, that causes them a sense of anxiety that they don't have much they can do about it. And actually, they have to avoid some of those medias altogether. And not just the news stream, but you could imagine how it is with social media or Facebook or Instagram, or especially when it's people comparing themselves to others and they're looking at other people's lives and get maybe jealous and they're not being grateful for what they have in their own life. And that could be a source of tension or anxiety as well.
So, what do you recommend? To quit media altogether, or what do you recommend? Can we have just the healthy amount of it? Because some people are so attached to it. That's my point.
So, as a psychiatrist, I don't make that strict decisions where you have to do this, you have to do that. But really, I try to help people to make educated choices so they can choose what's best for themselves. So, just hopefully, this being out in the open or people being aware that what they see or hear can affect their anxiety or mental state makes them a little bit more conscientious about it. Or maybe they'll think twice before watching the 9 o'clock news or something.
So, the media is a major habit that can cause an anxiety for all of us, either the news due to distress, something that you cannot control, right? And or through the comparison that you can see people, very rich people in other countries or in the same country, that keep popping to you with those very thick golden chain they have, which costs thousands of dollars, right? Or those fancy cars, which actually I learned through time they use it for advertising for themselves. So so a comparison absolutely is really something that really can strike a lot of from our audience. Dr. Anthony, I need to switch gear a little bit now. we mostly talked about the hidden habits that we do. But do you think there is something? I know we talked about values, and values is not something we do. So you told me, Dr. Kilada, that living not upon your value can be a hidden reason for continuous anxiety. So, Dr. Kilada, can you please define for us what is values, and is there a difference between value and principles and laws and regulation?
Yeah, I think values and principles are more like our inner ways of living or how we want to live. Maybe another way could be something that we hold a priority in our life, like we want something we want to strive for or live by. That I think is more values. Whereas the society we live in, the community, may have these rules or regulations or sort of suggestions or pressures that they may want us to do or push us towards, but that may or may not be in line with our values that we hold dearly.
So if I live in a community, let's say a conservative community or a liberal community, right? And some people will have the tendency to make other people happy or to act like that community. Somebody who's not a conservative who will act like a conservative to live happy or to gain the approval of the community, right? And we see this a lot. And on the liberal side, too, it's the same thing. So if I am a conservative guy and I live in a liberal community, so conservatism in this case is a value I live with, right? And if I will try to amuse others or I'm trying to get approval of others and trying to be liberal, in this case, I would be living in an anxiety. Am I correct on that?
Quite possible. I think some people may have different abilities to adapt to different cultures or settings. And so some people may not be affected by it, where the others might be more sensitive to those dynamics and might be prone to anxiety because of that.
Right. And for our audience, to make it simple also to identify your values, if it's not clear for you yet, I will link to the episode a Word file where you will see 5 groups of different value where you can answer some question and know what are your real values you live with. Because according to science and according to Dr. Kalada in our episode now, if you try to live against your values, you will be anxious no matter what you do. But you need to know what are your real values first, not the principles or the values that the community is pushing on you, which you might not agree with, but you're trying to fit in. My next question, you talked a lot, Dr. Kalada, about thoughts and the direction of thoughts. Can you please tell us about, first of all, can you define for us how thoughts affect our anxiety level, please?
Yeah, actually, that's a great question because whatever we think about tends to grow, almost like a plant. So whatever we focus on or whatever we hold in our minds, that kind of expand basically. And so if we have an anxious thought or something that causes worries and we dwell on it or keep thinking about it, then we're going to probably get more anxious. And so a lot of times as a mental health professional, if there's a thought that I see someone suffering from or struggling with, especially if it causes anxiety, I'm going to try to work with them to change that pattern of thinking. Maybe to stop the thought altogether, or maybe go through a series of questions to help them look at the situation differently so that anxious thought stops, or that they have other thoughts that they can replace it with that aren't as anxiety provoking. So there's a technique called cognitive behavioral therapy. And so I'll actually take that thought or that scenario and then play it further. So maybe I'll ask you on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 meaning you really believe that thought, 1 meaning you don't believe in it that much. How much do you rate it on a scale of 1 to 10? So you take, and then you can ask yourself what feeling comes with the thought. Do you feel anxious about it? Do you feel scared, sad, depressed, worried? And 1 to 10, how likelihood or how strong is that emotion? And then you can ask yourself, are there other ways to think about the situation? Maybe, for example, AI could help your kids with finding jobs, or maybe your kids will be able to use AI to their advantage, or maybe AI will create jobs that weren't existing before, make their lives easier. So trying to work through those questions can help to get underneath the underlying fears or anxiety. You could also ask yourself, what evidence is there that's true that AI is going to replace your kids' jobs or take away their independence later in life? So going through a series of questions, trying to find other solutions, other possibilities can often help.
Another question to you, the dwelling on ideas. So maybe I should ask this question before asking you how to reframe our thoughts. But how can we deal with dwelling on ideas? Because we all have some ideas which is going crazy in our brain all day long. We never stop about it. We never stop thinking about it. Many examples we have in politics and in personal life or whatever. How do you think we can deal with that?
So some people deal with it differently. Maybe they have to distract themselves altogether, maybe do something else, maybe change their behavior to change the thought.
Just to rehearse what you said, Dr. Kalala. So basically, if I keep dwelling on ideas all day long, I have to take my brain off those ideas, right? This should be the best way and the easiest way to do it. Do sports, read something, deep breathing, like we talked the last episode. Just take your brain off those ideas.
Right, and perhaps you're dwelling on it because maybe you didn't sleep that well the night before. Maybe you're not exercising, you're having too much caffeine. So try to recognize those habits that you could be doing that may make it more likely that you're dwelling on something negative or
So basically, working on the first part we talked about, which is the hidden habit that is causing anxiety for us, can help us stop dwelling on ideas or thoughts. And stop dwelling on thoughts will decrease our level of anxiety. Another thing you talked to me about, Dr. Kalada, is being thankful in life. That actually help. I don't know if we do that because in our world we always say Alhamdulillah, thanks the Lord, all day long. Like you can meet a beggar in the street or you can meet a very high rank professional and they are all always saying Alhamdulillah, thanks God. And I think this is where the culture coming from or the values coming from inside us in our community to be always in a gratitude or thankful mood. But I need to learn from you the scientific facts behind the gratitude.
that scientifically gratitude is very healthy. Oftentimes, they find that people who are able to express gratitude regularly, it helps fight off anxiety, helps fight off depression from coming. And some of the ways people can express gratitude, maybe they make a mental check mark for everything that they're grateful for. Maybe have a journal where they write down maybe 5 things each day or 5 things a week that they are grateful for. And to think about it deeply, for example, that thing you're grateful for, if it wasn't in your life, how would your life be different? And there's actually research done through UC Berkeley. It's called the Happiness Project, and they showed the effects of gratitude and positivity on one's life. And they find it helps people to be more creative as well, helps well-being, helps with managed stress. And there's a lot of scientific support there that gratitude is important for one's mental state.
Indeed. You mentioned the journals. I actually been discussing this with a couple of my friends a couple of weeks ago. We had friendly dinner and we've been discussing about the journals. And they've been asking me what is the scientific or the psychotic or the psychological reason behind writing down journals that will makes me feel better next morning. Can you please talk to us more about writing your thoughts down?
Just so some of the scientific studies that I came across is that people who write down in a journal just 10 to 15 minutes a day what their thoughts and feelings are. So whatever it is that's causing negativity, they're going to be able to see it in a more positive way when they write it down. Because writing it down may help someone to reprocess it differently, or basically to change the way they're thinking about the situation, or maybe they write it down and they thought of solutions that they didn't think of before. And this is especially true in people who are having a lot of pain or suffering in their life, or maybe it's hard to forgive people. And focusing on that pain or bitterness or resentment and writing it down is going to help in a way to release it as well as to help see it in a positive way. And we call that like the silver lining, where the cup is half full with water. You can say it's half full or half empty, but you always, in a way, want to focus on the good or positive. And in fact, there's a whole movement called positive psychology where they find that focusing on the good and positive is going to help.